If you want to make better melodies like this, I'm going to teach you how to make better melodies using a few techniques that by the end of this video will have all of your melodies stick like glue using psychology. To make better melodies, you have to stop thinking about music theory and start thinking about how the brain reacts to certain patterns. The brain is constantly trying to predict what's coming next. So great melodies are essentially a game of questions and answers, tensions and releases that keep the listener hooked. Not only am I going to teach you these techniques, but then I'm going to show you exactly how I use them to create that melody you heard in the intro. The first is the proximity effect, aka fluency. The brain prefers things that are easy to process. If people have to think hard to find the patterns in your melody, they're not going to want to listen to the whole song. This is why most pop music have really simple to understand melodies that repeat each other over and over again, so then people can kind of listen without even thinking about it. If your melody has very large intervals between notes, often that makes it harder for people to follow your melody. So I'm going to take the melody that I already made and I'm just going to increase the intervals between notes. So here we have an updated melody with the same rhythmic elements, but now it has a lot of jumps in intervals like this to here and there to there and all this stuff. So as you probably noticed, that melody is a lot harder to track as you listen to it, making it less catchy. To solve this, you're going to want to stay in a similar area and not jump too far away too quickly. If you do take a big leap, you want to make sure that you return back to where you came from as soon as possible. For example, in the melody, I did take a leap here, but right after that note, I jumped right back to where I came from, right here. And then even here, I come up here and I come right back down. That way the melody is a little easier to follow. The second technique is the 80-20 rule. You want to make sure your melody is mostly predictable, but add some unpredictability into it to make it a little bit more interesting. If you had a 100% predictable melody, people would just figure out the pattern and want to click off because it's not unique or interesting. If you had a 100% unpredictable melody, nobody's going to be able to follow the melody and it's not going to be catchy. I'm going to give you an example of the most predictable melody I can think of and an example of the least predictable melody I can think of. Alright, this is the most predictable melody I could think of using the loop that I already had. So as you can see, I'm basically resolving to the same note every single time and the melody just repeats the entire time. There's no variations basically besides this one little note. Alright, and here's the most unpredictable melody. Every single note in this melody is in key. However, there's large jumps that don't resolve. There's random notes that don't belong there. This melody is so bad because it's extremely unpredictable. Nobody's going to want to follow that. That doesn't stick to anything. If you were to play that 100 times to somebody and then try to make them memorize the melody, they wouldn't be able to do it. 0% catchy. So as you can see, you're going to want a little bit of both. 80% predictable and then 20% unpredictable. Little variations in your melody to make it more interesting. Alright, the third technique is the question and answer technique. To create questions and answers, also known as tensions and releases, you're essentially playing with the brain's natural need for closure. In psychology, we call this the Gestalt principle of closure, where the brain automatically tries to fill in the gaps as the melody is playing. If I were to play you this C major scale, your brain should recognize the last note does not resolve. You may even be able to realize that the note that it wants to resolve to is this C up here. If I place this note up here, it resolves. So you can kind of see how that would work. So that's a very basic example how the brain tries to fill in those gaps. The goal of the question is to create a rising or unstable feeling. You want the listener to be hanging for a little bit, so then when you resolve it, it's satisfying. As you could hear in the scale that I played you, the note below C in that scale wants to resolve here. Question, tension, instability, answer, resolution. You can also do this with the 808. This is a very popular 808 pattern that has the root note first and then creates tension by raising up a semitone, then resolves on the downbeat again, or the first beat, and then creates tension again and then resolves again. So here's the example. Tension, resolution, tension. If I were to play this with no tension at all, it would be extremely boring. There's like nothing going on there. Yeah, the rhythm's there and you can bounce your head to it a little bit, but there's no like interesting like tension and release with going on. You can even start with the tension and then resolve later, or start with the tension up here, resolve, and so forth. Tension, resolution. So that's a very basic example of how to create tension and resolution. And at the end of this video, I'm gonna explain all the techniques I'm showing you with the melody I showed you in the beginning and how I use them to create that melody. The last technique is the contour. The brain associates pitch contour, or like rises and falls, with human speech and emotion. So rising melodies increase energy, tension, and questioning. So for example, if I were to ask a question like, do you like making melodies? When I ask the question, I leave you hanging a little bit by saying melodies and rising my voice. So then naturally the answer would be to resolve it. Yes, I do like making melodies. Resolution. You can make the entire melody start at a specific point, either go up or go down, and then when it ends that resolves to the first note. Alright, so I have these chords here, but you can basically see what I mean by where you start leading to where you end. I've got this here, the start F coming down, but then this chord comes back. This chord wants to resolve back to the root chord, which was F minor. So now I'm going to show you exactly how I used all of these techniques to create the melody that you heard in the intro. So I'm going to play the melody solo first. Alright, so first we start with this note here. This is the beginning note. It doesn't do anything at this point in the song. The listener doesn't have anything else to compare it to. Then I do this little riff kind of thing and I end here. This is a tension note that wants to resolve either to the F or the C. So I chose the C. So here we have the first little section of the song. Created tension here, resolution down here. I create a catchy melody by repeating the same thing I just did, creating that catchy feeling, but then I interrupt the repetition here and do a different riff. That makes the melody a little bit more interesting. Not only do I use the repetition rules here and the question and answer rules, I also use the rule that if you were to make a large jump, you return back to where you started. So I started here, resolve here, but then I come back to where I just started. You see this? So I made a large jump, but I came back and I did the same thing right here as well. And then in the second part of this melody, I use the same rhythmic elements right over here and over here to keep the melody catchy. I use tension and resolution here, tension, resolution, repetition to do it again, tension, resolution, and then I use the contour rule to bring the melody back to where I started by using these two notes right here. This note wants to resolve back to the starting note. So here's the melody again. Yeah, hopefully this was helpful. Now you have a couple of more things that you can think about when you make your melodies to make them more catchy and more unique. Make sure to like and subscribe down below. Let me know if you want me to do anything specific. See you in the next one. Peace.